Mark Smith is a man of the water and a native of the Crystal Coast, a place that's attracted more and more development over the years.
One day it'll probably look like Miami if it keeps on, and I don't want that to happen. Even though I don't own it, and I feel like I do.
He may not own it, but this 30-year merchant marine is doing everything he can to preserve this area of the North Carolina coast. His method? Using one piece of land to save another. This 6,000-acre wetland near the area of Morehead City is one of the largest wetland restoration projects in the country. You see, it used to be farmland. About 25 years ago, a group of organizations bought the property to restore it to its original state. Today, Smith is the caretaker and Todd Miller is in charge of the North Carolina Coastal Federation, which owns the property.
The best thing is not only the habitat here, but what it's doing for the surrounding coastal waters.
Wetlands are known as Earth's kidneys. They filter out pollutants from the waters that flow through them. And when heavy rain falls, they serve as a sponge, trapping the water, helping avoid flooding in communities downstream. The preserve also aims to protect the oyster farmers that frequent the water. Ryan Bethea, who's part of a growing $30 million industry in the state, says the wetlands are key for his trade.
North Carolina's got, in my opinion, the most pristine water on the East Coast due to lack of development.
But some say that could now be at risk. This summer, the North Carolina General Assembly passed legislation limiting wetlands protections, paving the way for development, especially agriculture, in areas supporters say sometimes did not truly meet the definition of a wetland. Governor Roy Cooper, who vetoed the bill only to see his veto overridden, says about half of the state's wetlands are affected.
Felt like deja vu. These were problems that we dealt with back in the early 1980s when massive land clearing was going on to convert wetlands to farmland and for development.
The North Carolina legislation was introduced earlier this year. It got a clear legal pathway when the U.S. Supreme Court made a recent controversial decision, one that will have impacts around the country. The court, in a 5-4 opinion, said the Clean Water Act only protects wetlands connected to rivers and streams considered relatively permanent or continuous, allowing farmers and developers to dig up or fill millions of acres of wetlands. Industry and farm groups praised the ruling, saying it's a long time coming, and it gave supporters of the North Carolina legislation a boost to say the wetlands shouldn't get any more protection than the new federal rules, something other states could decide to argue. Miller says that definition of a federally protected wetland misses the mark.
I mean, they're all connected, they're just not connected by boats. Many of our wetlands are just big sponges. It brings the amount of protection really to a narrow fringe of what existed prior.
Wetlands make up 5.5% of the contiguous United States, and it's even higher in North Carolina with 12%. But that number has shrunk. According to one study, the lower 48 states lose 80,000 acres of coastal wetlands each year to things like development and sea level rise. NOAA says that equates to around 7 football fields of wetland lost every hour.
The planet Earth's water filter.
The river where Smith took us on is a lot cleaner, he says, than it once was, thanks to that wetland he preserves just a few miles from here. An example, he says, of the impact wetlands can have.
Without it, we're not going to survive. We got to have that water filtered before it runs off into our estuaries and pollutes the birthplace of all the seafood we eat. And we've got to protect it.
A protection he worries that could now become even harder. On the Crystal Coast, Reuben Jones, Spectrum News.